So you wrote something this week that really struck a chord with me. The topic is worldview engineering, which sounds pretty deep and esoteric, but it really isn't. But the crux of which sort of mirrors something I wrote this week on a completely different topic, but maybe we'll see how it overlaps. But it leads with prompt engineering will be a commodity skill inside of 3 years. And my gut reaction was that I don't know if prompt engineering was really ever a thing. I think it feels like something that the experts tried to coin to make it sound inaccessible so that you had to hire an expert to do it for you. And you kind of went through history in chapter and verse and kind of said, this is not the first time something like this nomenclature has been adopted to make things, seem inaccessible to the hoi polloi. So first of all, what did you mean by prompt engineering being a commodity skill? And then walk us through a little bit about how you've seen this pattern repeat itself over the years.
Yeah. So I mentioned this before. I gave a talk. I was hired to give a speech to a bunch of young leaders inside of a large organization. And so this was a little over a year ago. And I remember, the name of that talk was Prompt for Success. And it was all about how to create a good prompt. And the reason for that at the time, of course, we were inside of, a chat GPT or whatever, trying to get the best output. And you had to provide all of this information up front in order to get that output you were hoping for. And so, of course, even today, you could go on LinkedIn, at Substack, wherever, and people are sharing Reddit, here's great prompts to use, right? Here's how you prompt for this, and here's how you prompt to get great writing, and here's how you prompt to get these types of answers. And the reality is we've actually moved away from that. So before we get to how we've moved away from that and how I'm seeing this, it was actually a conversation we had with Brian Clark last season, where he brought up WordPress when WordPress came out. And essentially, the WordPress became this commodity in the sense that prior to WordPress or these content management systems, you needed a technical person in order to get a website live. You needed to spend thousands of dollars, and you needed to find somebody like was on our team at the agency that I was at who knew how to HTML, who knew how to CSS, who knew how to stand up a server with Apache or Nginx and PHP and DNS and networking and all of these other things. It was like, you couldn't just go to GoDaddy and click a couple of buttons and there you had a builder, and then you could drag and drop and copy paste and you had a website live in an afternoon, right? That didn't exist, but the technical skill became commoditized. And so then the real skills moved. And so once WordPress came out, I then started to see gaps. It was like, okay, well, building a website's pretty easy. What's the next problem we need to solve for? And that led me into attribution marketing. And, it was easy to get a form. You'd use Gravity Forms, Contact Form 7. There were all these form tools. You could get a form on a website. So we're in B2B marketing at the time, right? Everybody's trying to get leads. So building a form was easy. What wasn't easy was knowing where that person came from when they filled out the form. Okay, we solved that problem. We built attribution tracking. We did internally. That was my skill. But then guess what? HubSpot now has attribution tracking. Salesforce and Pardot have attribution tracking. It's now universal. Everybody has it. So the skills continue to move, basically. And that's where I was saying prompt engineering is no longer the skill. It's accessible to everyone because the model is moving that we can talk in natural language to the LLMs and get the responses we want if you set it up properly in the right way. Yeah.
Which is what we'll talk about. But yes, so that's the pattern that keeps repeating, is the democratization of the hard skill. And I think this is the current state in the future going forward, is these tech companies know that for them to be successful, for them to show revenue to the investors, they need adoption. And they need adoption by non-experts because that's the masses. So they're going to always trend towards, how do I make this easy for the layperson? And so we've gone from this reality, if it ever was one, of a prompt engineer, and you need to go to Reddit to understand a great prompt and how to construct one, to what you just said, which is what the LLMs want. And the whole reason they were built is so that they could understand just regular language, without sophistication, without engineering, just like talk into it and it'll talk back to you. That's what it's designed to do. And then it's going to learn from you. Right. And that's maybe the blessing and the curse, that it's going to learn from you. But this is where we are now. I can't envision any new tech coming out in the future that's going to be like, oh, I got to hire an engineer to do this for me, at least not for the long haul.
So my aha moment a couple months ago was when, well, if you go back a year ago, we were investing in N8N and LibreChat and our own infrastructure. Again, think of WordPress, right? And think of websites. Like, I was investing in infrastructure for AI. And then what happens? Anthropic comes out with Claude Desktop. Like, they came out with WordPress for
Right.
AI.
Yeah. Yep.
And it was
They
like,
call those killer apps. Don't they call those
yep,
killer apps back in the day? Because they essentially
yep.
kill a whole category.
And
I
here
saw
I
them.
was trying to create a Claude Desktop. I'm spending tens of thousands of dollars so that I could create something for my team. What I
What
realized
meanwhile,
was,
meanwhile,
yep,
Anthropic is spending hundreds of millions of dollars,
correct.
which is a lesson to be learned. But continue.
So the lesson, and there were a few things I read, a few things that were spoken to me that lead to this article, but led to this idea that, like, well, wait, though, the time I'd put into all the building wasn't lost. The technology is lost, but my successes, my failures, my point of views, my insight, like all of those things I had formed now. And I realized that was all portable, that I could take it out of where it was and put it into a different interface, a different piece of technology, and realize what was really valuable wasn't the technology. It was my point of view. It was my learnings. It was my failures. It was like all of these. It was how I approach and why I approach work in the first place. Like, what problem am I solving for? What are my clients' problems? Like, I now had all of this documented.
Which is getting to the point where now you've got something that is closer to a worldview than just a series of prompts, prompt hacks, let's call those the ones on Reddit. Those are hacks, but those are somebody else's prompts to solve somebody else's problems, to maybe capture what somebody else thinks or feels. They're not yours. The prompts you can adopt and steal, but there's something deeper than that, that is a worldview, and that's what you were building. So explain what you mean by worldview. And I don't even know if you want to use the favorite metaphor that you shared with me, because that's it hit home when you did.
Which metaphor? Because there's a few.
Well, the long form one, that's about 80 pages, written back, I think, in the 50s by C.S. Lewis.
Got you. Yes. So, well, here, before I go there, actually, because I do want to go there. And that was maybe the one that hit me first. But if I could start with Steve Jobs, because he actually used the terminology worldview. So I mentioned earlier, like, all of a sudden this term is hitting me from different angles. And I'm like, wait, there's something there. And, I needed to get a new understanding of what this really meant. But so back in 1983, Jobs does a talk at some Aspen conference, and he doesn't say worldview in that talk. He does in 1985, but he's describing the exact same principle, in that he was marveled at the fact that he had access to books written by Aristotle, right? So the technology was the written word, a book that was handed down over centuries, transcribed and, rewritten, and is accessible in a library in 1983 for him to read and learn from. And he compared why that was important, because Aristotle was the mentor to one of the greatest people to ever have walked the earth, Alexander the Great. He's called Alexander the Great for a reason.
Yeah.
And so, but then Jobs pivots as he's just finished giving a talk about the Apple computer and wanting to see a world where every human has a personal computer, a PC, which is new terminology at the time. These computers used to be big mainframes, and now here it's something that can sit on somebody's desk. And he says, wouldn't it be interesting if someday, he probably doesn't use the word interesting, but he wants to see a world where one day somebody like Aristotle is on the earth and we could capture their worldview into the computer, so that me, Steve Jobs, later, when that person isn't here, I could ask that person a question and get a response that is not just what was written down about that person, but actually like how that person thinks. And it's kind of like how you always lead with why, Tom. It's like you kind of want to dig a little bit deeper into some of Aristotle's stuff and say, but why? And where were you coming from when you said something like that? And unfortunately, we can't do that. But like with AI, is that actually a possibility?
Just a quick side note. It's interesting that you were mentioning Steve Jobs, because has there ever been anyone in modern history that was better at removing that inaccessibility layer? Remember, like when the Mac came out and only the computer nerds were in the lab, and they were on these blue screens and they were in MS DOS and they were writing mini prompts, if 10 equals this, then go to 20 and all this stuff. The regular person was just like, the computers are for dorks. And then he comes out with this completely accessible user interface that anyone can do. I can open up McWrite and just start typing. For the kids, McWrite is basically Microsoft Word before its time. But so anyways, it's a perfect example of what is always going to be happening. Somebody is going to say, this needs to be accessible to the masses, and I'm going to remove this sort of inaccessibility. Moat, maybe, is a good word. So
Moat's a
continue.
great word, actually. Yep. And we might talk more about moat.
So he's describing, in his view, without using the word, what we're referring to today as this worldview, correct?
Yeah. And so this is another crazy connection, right? Lewis, so Lewis writes here, I have it. He says, this is in this book, Abolition of Man. And my oldest daughter, Brooke, had picked up and read the book here recently, a book that I have read a few times, but not recently. And she starts describing what she's learned from reading the book. And I'm finding these correlations. And so anyway, there's a sentence in here that I write in the Worldview article. I believe in Christianity as I believe the Son has written, not only because I see it, but because by it I see everything else. Okay. What he's describing there is a window. It's a
Yes.
lens. It's a frame that has shaped, so worldview, it has shaped how he sees the thing on the other side. So it's not so much describing the thing on the other side, it's having an understanding based off of the framing, how you're seeing it, that then describes that thing, right? So let's see, I write it down here. The window frame, it provides a frame for a way to view the world as a frame of reference. It's not the object you're staring at, it's the lens you're looking through.
So almost as if it's a window and not a mirror.
Almost as if it's a window
Right.
and not a mirror. We've talked a little about window and mirror marketing, haven't we?
Yes. Yes. Before we get too philosophical, can I just walk it back to the practical just for a minute, and then we'll go back into worldview? Because something
Yes.
I wrote this week, I think, is an illustration of, because we need to break this down. Why are we talking about this, right? This is for businesses, ultimately marketers, to understand what we're talking about. So it's not some philosophical, literature course. So I going back to the idea of a prompt. So I essentially made the case this week that if you go to ChatGPT, just open AI, literally and figuratively, and just say, write me an article about trends in digital marketing. And let's say I've even gone to Reddit and grabbed the perfect prompt, because I don't know anything about marketing, but I say, make sure you cover the difference between SEO and GEO. How has lead gen and attribution changed? And what does the future look like for demand generation? So I got all these buzzwords, and I just say,
And you
write the
say
article.
you're a world-class copywriter with 15 years
Yeah.
experience.
Oh yeah, I got to do all that stuff, right? And so it's going to spit something out, right? But it's not what I think about trends in digital marketing. It just went and scraped the internet and said, "Oh, I get what he wants, a Wikipedia article, and here it is." That's different than I went into a system that you built that has our worldview embedded into it through 30 years of experience, 3 or 4 years worth of content, whether it's our podcast, our writings, guests that we've talked to, all this stuff, into this machine that understands my worldview. And I did a prompt yesterday. I said, write an article about what I believe is the current state of content marketing in the age of AI. And it spit back exactly what I think, what I feel, what I fear, all this stuff, because it knew, all right, there's these trends, there's this window, and there's this mirror, and there's a distinction between these. It spit back exactly what I think. I could literally copy and paste that and put it up if I wanted to. I didn't. It's just an experiment. I wanted to see, does this thing truly understand my worldview? And it does. And that's the difference, I think, practically speaking. Having your people have access to AI tools and they outsource their thinking and their typing to it, as opposed to what I'm advocating for is you need to keep the thinking to yourself, outsource the typing only. And you can only
That's
do
so
that
good.
if you've got a machine that understands your worldview.
We've got to capture that transcript. Don't outsource your thinking, outsource the writing. Yeah.
The
It's
typing, really.
the
And
typing, the typing.
because
Yeah.
the
No,
case
good
I was making
clarification.
is
Yeah.
writing isn't typing. Writing isn't sitting down. I said, if you're sitting down and writing as you're thinking, that's just dictation, right? And so the writing is the thinking that you do about the topic, either for an hour, a week, 10 years. That's the writing. Then once you actually put this on the paper, pixels, that's just typing. Fine if you want to outsource the typing to AI, it's great at it, right? But it needs to know what you think, feel, fear, love, hate, all of those things. And this is the worldview we're talking about. So
Mhm.
that's why I think this is relevant to content marketers, leadership teams, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, and I want everybody to know, if you're watching this, like what Tom just described is a real thing. We showed it on the watering hole last week, so you could go to that recording if you want. So after that recording, Tom, you got my shared repository of thinking, the the worldview, which is also your thinking, because it was 500 meg and 10,000 files worth of transcripts from our podcast episodes, transcripts from our meetings with clients, transcripts of our internal meetings, all synthesized down into what I'm calling doctrine,
Yep. Doctrine.
which is what you just described: our fears, our motivations, the problems we solve for, how we approach work.
How we do it differently and how we think differently, which is key. Because I feel like we're counterstream
Exactly.
to like what most people think nowadays, which is go to Reddit and grab a prompt from an engineer. So it has to be, I mean, it has to be your unique philosophies, and doctrine is a great word, because otherwise it's just other people's thoughts and you are just outsourcing the thinking. But continue. One thing you left out though, you didn't leave it out, but you didn't call on it specifically. It's also the synthesis of the experts who we've interviewed over the years, who we believe to be right and true and correct. And it's not just what we think. It's like, this is what Mark Schaefer thinks. This is what Jeannie Dietrich thinks. This is what Brian Clark, like, because we've adopted those philosophically into our own doctrine, it becomes part of our worldview.
We stand
And
on the shoulders of giants,
we
right?
do. Yep, we do.
And so it's like we have this opportunity to talk to some of the giants and understand their worldview. Like to sit down and talk to. So Mark Schaefer is in this article we're discussing today. We got to talk to Mark Schaefer and get an understanding of his thoughts on AI. And then he has books, and we've read some of those books. And then he's got a Mark bot. So
Right.
he has a personification, a worldview of him that actually lives in ChatGPT that I've used and had conversations with, and given
It's
it
what Jobs
my
wanted from
thinking.
I'm sorry to interrupt. It's what Jobs wanted from Aristotle. We could go to Mark Schaefer and ask Mark Schaefer, even if he's not in the room. We've done this. We said, here's something we've created. What do you think about it? It gave us remarkably, because I know what Mark Schaefer thinks, because I'm a disciple and I read everything he writes. And so when it spit back and said, here's where I think you landed and here's where I think you missed, I felt like chills, because I'm like, Mark Schaefer's in the room with me right now.
Yeah.
Right? So
Okay, where were we? Where did we
let's
leave
talk
off?
about, all right. So now that explains the concept of the worldview.
Lewis. Were we still talking about Lewis, or
Yep.
we moved on from there?
Well, you just talk about because what we're talking about, there's layers, right? And
Yes.
Lewis described this in his book. Talk about the head, the chest, and the stomach.
Perfect. Okay, so the head, which I think is where a lot of people are focused on if we use this terminology with AI, is essentially the brain, right? So this is where your logic sits, your analysis, your reasoning. That's the LLM, the source of information that you have. It's basically everything that everybody's trying to get access to right now and find to. Everybody's focused on. Yeah, I mean, you'll hear this terminology like build a second brain. in your AI and like how to get your AI to remember conversations you had. And, there's all these GitHub repositories and all these skills out there that basically solve this problem. But that Lewis said that the brain is where your reasoning happens. And then there's the belly or the gut, right? And that's your appetite. So your raw drives, your sort of hunger, desire. You talked about fear,
Urges,
impulses, but it acts without knowing whether the action is right or wrong. We talk about this. This is
the
like
gut feeling.
you think about human terminology, right? Oh, it was my gut feeling. I went and did this, right? You reacted and went
Or
to a
should I
certain
go with my
direction,
head, or should I go with my gut?
right?
Well, it's not a binary choice. It's not one or the other, because there's a layer in between.
There's a layer in between the head and the gut that Lewis describes as the chest, which mediates the head and the gut. So it sits in between physically, but it also ends up being that mediator. Well, okay. So the chest, he sort of talks about, and this is the best way to do an analogy on this, in my opinion, is let's say, and I'm going to use this analogy. I think Lewis does either in the book or somewhere else. I've read so many of his books, I can't remember exactly. But he was a soldier in World War I, one of the bloodiest, gruesome wars ever on Earth, right? There's this analogy that I think he uses about a grenade. I'm going to use this analogy here as a similarity, right? So you take two soldiers, let's say they join the Marines, they both get the same equipment, they both get a rifle, a backpack, and they get handed the Marine Corps Creed. They both get handed the Creed. Now, one is sent off immediately to war. The other one goes to boot camp, and he's modeled by his drill instructor, by other Marines, how he's supposed to behave, how he's supposed to make his bed when he gets up in the morning, how his uniform is supposed to be, no wrinkles, creases, exactly put on, how his rifle gets cleaned. He learns discipline. He learns through trial and error. He sees modeled to him correct behavior. Okay. Now they're both end up meeting together later at a battle, and the enemy throws a grenade right between them and their platoon. Okay. Soldier, let's call him A, that doesn't go through boot camp, that doesn't see the modeling. He has, first of all, well, in his gut, he knows that he has an instinct to survive. And it says in the Marine Corps Creed, you're supposed to go kill your enemy and survive, right? Well, so his instinct is going to be, and his rationale in his brain, run. That's a bad thing. Okay. But Marine B, who's gone through basic training, who's seen discipline modeled, but not only that, he has seen sacrifices made by other soldiers and understands that there's another layer to this, that it's not just about himself. It's about protecting his fellow brothers, and his chest in a split second will tell him, dive on that grenade, cover it, smother it to protect the rest of my team, despite the fact that he still has the instinct deep within him for survival. His brain knows, turn around and run. This thing's going to end me. But what does his chest do? It intervenes. So that's the best example, right? This chest overrides the brain's sort of instinct, our natural instinct, but the chest comes through lived experiences. And it's those lived experiences, what we were just talking about. If we not simplify this, but sort of change the direction of something that is sort of morbid to marketing, which is in the world that we live in, that
Also morbid.
you potentially, but you have 25, 30 years.
That's what I mean by
As
morbid. It's been killing me for 30 years.
Yeah.
Slowly.
Coming at it from one angle. I have 30 years of it coming from another angle. We've spent the last 3 years discussing our angles, right? But these lived experiences that we bring to the table shape our chests. It just so happens our chests converge here at this moment, but that is where we make decisions in moments that help guide how we handle our businesses and make decisions for our clients. Ultimately, it is that chest that people pay us money for. It is not what's up here. It is not what down here. Because what's up here, the LLM has access to more of it than what I have here. So why would anyone pay me for this? They wouldn't. They would pay me for this.
Yeah. Really, what they should pay you for is to identify their own chest. Because this is what we're talking about going back to the real world where we've got these AI tools now, and we've got a whole team of people who are all using their own tools. They're all using their own prompts, and they're all just potentially the risk is that there's no unity across the organization about what the organization's chest is, what we believe. And this is the most powerful thing that separates, it's the last thing that separates you from a competitor is what you believe. Because as you said, what is being thought is accessible all over the internet at any given millisecond. But what you, excuse me, you uniquely believe, that belief layer is what we're encouraging brands to not only discover, but document so that you can create a machine that has a head, a chest, and a gut without having people out there in the world is not knowing. It's like I used this example yesterday. As like for years, we'd always say to companies, you have a brand, whether you decide to go through a brand strategy process or not. You know, the brand is what other people define for you if you're not defining it for yourself. You use the analogy of it wasn't a brand. What was the other thing you said?
The employee
Culture.
orientation.
Culture. Your company's going to have a culture, whether or not you take any active participation in creating that culture, in documenting it, in policing it, with or without you. And the same thing is with AI. This is the point you made: is that AI is going to create context for you, for your company, based on what it's learning from the people using it. If you don't play an active role in forming what that doctrine is, then you are letting the world dictate what your chest thinks, or at least trying to figure out what they think your chest thinks.
Right. Right. Yeah. So the chest becomes this governing layer, say, in a brand when, it's almost more of what not to do than what to do. Right. And that's what makes it governing, right? If you're making a decision as to, okay, the numbers are bad, this quarter, you've got to do X, Y, or Z. You need to make a decision, you know, rationally, you might go one direction, your gut's telling you go another direction. Well, you look at your company values, you look at what the company believes, and the best companies get down into that middle layer, and that's what governs their decision. And that's what we're saying, at least from a marketing perspective, from a brand perspective, when you're creating content, creating positioning, creating messaging, understanding your customer's worldview, understanding your own worldview, and finding the frame, the window to do that communication and have something that governs that, it becomes really critical. Or, as you just said, the LLM will make it up for you. I mean, you said it here. I wrote it down. I don't care what you think you are. Your customer is what you say you are.
Right. Yeah. I care more about what the customer thinks you are, because to them, that's what you are. Right. And
Right.
so, especially and this is where things go astray from startups, like when it's a founder led company early on, the founder has a head, a heart, and a gut, right? I'm sorry, a head, chest, and a gut. And that's what drives everything. It's that balance, as you said. But once the company becomes an organism, that's lost. It's no longer the founder making all of the decisions. And this is why you need to think of your business as an entity with a head, a chest, and a gut. And
Mhm.
then you need to document, what does the head think? What does the gut, what are its urges or instincts? And then in between, what do we truly value, feel, and how is that different from our competitors? And why does it connect with what our customer truly values and feels? That's the holy grail right there. And that's the
Mhm.
thing that nobody else has access to, right? This whole prompt engineering, no one's going to be able to get into your AI if you created this machine, which you showed last week. It's like that's your boat. That's your, you call it a brand guardian. It's a perfect word for it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it is a moat. What did I have? Oh, I wrote down something earlier.
While you're
Right.
looking for that,
I
I
I
just
mean,
want
the
to
moat
encourage
is what
people.
the system believes at the end of the day. It's like, right, nobody has access to that. Right. So if everybody has access to the tools, the models, the GitHub repos, like everything's just going to be free. Even the models right now are free. I could get a Hermes. I could set up my own LLM inside my home or hosted on a server and everybody could connect to, that level playing field is going to exist. But the foundational piece that makes us unique and different, this what are we governed by, comes from some human foundational pieces, which if we get back to Lewis is what Lewis is saying. There's a moral foundation in what he's saying. We are grounded in how we're wired. You and I are wired in these grounded, me from the math side, you from the magic written word side, right? Those two are converging together. And then we say, okay, let's take our lived experiences, let's document that into a core belief system, and then layer the brain on top of that and see what happens. And now when you go ask a question, you don't have to prompt. First of all, it's loaded with all of the stuff already. So that's where the prompting goes away, right? There's no, you are a, it already knows who it is and who it served. You got to name yours. You want to tell everybody what you named yours?
Hemingway.
Hemingway.
Because Hemingway, of course, I had to pick a writer, right? And it just so happens that his nickname was Papa. Because originally I wanted mine to be Zeus, because Zeus was sort of the one controlling all the other gods, right? But I was like, Zeus, I'm not into Greek mythology. What I am, I do like it, but I'm more into just writing. So it's Papa is my orchestrator that, like you said, it already knows all this stuff. I didn't have to do any context when I said write an article about what I think about the state of content marketing in the age of AI. It knew already.
Right. Right.
That was it.
Yep.
So no prompt, no hack. And so I would encourage people, if they watch this and they're like, oh, how does this work in practice? Go look at last week's watering hole, because you demonstrated this, the one that you built for
It's
our
the technology, right?
it's the technology side, but it shows practically, like, what does this mean? Like, I think you even did a prompt, what do we believe? So if you're listening to this, go to your chat GPT and say, what do you believe? And see what you get back. Versus what you said, which is, what do we believe? It was the synthesis of the authentic philosophies, feelings, thoughts, expertise that you and I have created and documented it into doctrine, into this machine. And now imagine your whole company has access to this. Your whole company can say, what do we believe? Or write me an article about what we believe. Write me a social media post about what we believe, right? I'm going into an employee review with this employee. I feel like they're misaligned with what we believe. Can you give me something that I could give to this person to realign them? It's so powerful. I want to read how your article concludes, because I know you have to go. But so I thought this is how you wrapped it up. It's perfect. The question in front of you is not which model to use or which agent framework to build on. The question is whether you have encoded the worldview that makes you know which problems are worth solving in the first place, and whether you wrote it down before you turned the machine on. That's the important part. Write it down before you turn the machine on. And too few companies are doing that. And they're letting, as you say, they're letting the LLMs write it down for them. And that's the wild, wild west. That's the chaos tax we talked about in Bullhorns and Bullseyes.
You know who taught me that?
Aristotle. Next best thing.
That's why.
Right.
Why are
Yeah.
we even here in the first place? You know what I mean? And it's just, everything starts with why. The more I talk to you, the more I realize, like, why slaps me in the face every single day.
And it's funny because you resurrect that dogma in me, because I used to have a brand strategy firm, and I would preach why, how, what till the cows came home. And I didn't create it. I believed in what Simon Sinek taught me. He's my Aristotle, right? I'm like, yes, this makes so much sense. And I reoriented my entire worldview. And now that you've resurrected this in me, I must say why, how, what 10 times a day now. And I'm not ever going to stop, because I firmly believe it. Not everybody does. There's people who watch that Simon Sinek TED Talk and they're like, no one cares why you do things. They're missing the point. But it's like, great. I'm glad that you think that makes what I think and feel special and different. And I'm only going to find clients that resonate, that with whom that resonates, right? Those are the good fit clients. The bad fit clients are the one, can you just outsource this to the LLM and create some lead gen and all those other words that, yes, exist, but aren't the why. They're the what. So. All right,
Well,
final
thank
thought.
you.
I know you got to run. It's a Friday. We got to get out of the water, going out to the range here.
We do. Yep. Out on the range. We're going to do some farming this weekend. Actually, all the garden beds are planted. Everything's looking good. We just need speaking of water, we need some rain. So hopefully we get a little rain this weekend, not during the day. I'd prefer it come at night while I'm
I know. Yeah.
sleepy, but we'll see.
It's so, I mean, all we do is complain that it's been raining nonstop for 3 weeks, and then it's beautiful for 2 weeks, and we're like, we need some rain. So, such is life in Michigan. Pretty soon we'll be complaining about the cold. But
Pretty soon.
all the more
All right.
reason to get out there on a Friday and enjoy this beautiful weather. You have any final thoughts on worldview engineering?
Gosh. Yes. My final thought. I'll give you a takeaway. If this seems difficult, the smartest move to do is to get a tool that captures and transcribes everything. Every conversation you're having with a client, every conversation you're having with your team. Get a note taker on your phone, record thoughts, ideas, whatever. You don't need to be typing it. If you like a notebook, great, get a notebook. But what you will find is if you take that data and you put it into AI and you say, what is my why inside of this, right? You start mining for the insight, and hopefully I figure out, because I kind of came here on mistake. I hope someday I can teach how to mine for that data. We build you some prompts, some AI that goes and looks for it, but your worldview is in there. And so if you just start capturing your thoughts, we captured it on a podcast, we captured it in our client meetings, just start talking. Go to a coffee shop with a colleague and talk shop, but record that conversation and do 10 of those, 20 of those, put it into AI and give it to MarkBot. You'll get some insight. And that insight will iterate through to a worldview where it'll start to become clear. It'll be like a kaleidoscope. You'll start to look through the lens and you'll start turning it a little bit. And all of a sudden, the perfect picture will appear. And that's what you want to then document and get into your AI. So that's my takeaway today.
And I will put a plug rather than take it to MarkBot, which I absolutely love. Take it to Curtis and say, what can your machine make of this? And then the only thing I would add to what you said is it's not just your why. And this is what people get wrong with. I think they missed a point with Simon Sinek is it's not the customer doesn't care why you're in business. The customer cares why they got there in the first place to even want to understand what your business does. It's their why. So it's a synthesis of not only the founder's why, the company's ethos, broadly speaking, because that, like I said, it gets messy as the company expands. But rooted at the core of that is like, what's the customer's why? You get that into your machine, and now you really got something. So
Yep.
that's my
Yep.
final thought. Cool.
Thanks,
All right.
partner.
Well, we'll remind people to subscribe to Bullhorns and Bullseyes. It's a podcast. It's a Substack. It's a YouTube channel. It's a little bit of everything, and that's the more, what would you say, planned and structured version of the watering hole, which we like both. This allows
We
us to
like
just
both.
riff. We
Yes.
literally figured out what we were going to talk about 5 minutes before we turned on. And so this is all just off the cuff. But again, it's rooted in what we believe and think and feel. We didn't have to prepare. We didn't have to put a chat. Hey, I'm having a podcast with Curtis. Give me some topics. It was just talk about what we think, talk about our
And
chests.
guess what, partner? I will grab the transcript and I will throw it in my AI and I will capture it and I will see if there's any new insight in there. If not, it'll be confirmation on what we already know.
It's also more additional learning. That's the other thing is you're never, too old to stop learning. Same goes for your LLMs.
Yep. All right. Have a great weekend, partner. We'll see you next week.
You too. Howdy, y'all.